All Aborigines from Sydney onwards are to be made prisoners of war.
And if they resist, they are to be shot.
They are to be shot.
They are to be shot.
And their bodies hung from trees.
Hung from trees.
And their bodies hung from trees. In the most conspicuous places, near where they fall,
so as to strike terror in the hearts of surviving natives.
Governor Lachlan Macquarie to soldiers in 1816.
I'm sorry.
It's pretty hard to sit with, to be honest. Like, I'm a bit lost for words, really. The fact that things like this are published and things are still taught about this Governor Macquarie as this like great, amazing person, yet he's someone who's willing to wipe out a whole culture just for a bit of land. And then that's what the whole country was built on. Like, the whole country was built on invasion and taking. People try to say that this doesn't exist. Like, that's in everyone. Deep down, that's in every white person, and it's on us as white people to work through that and learn for ourselves that this isn't the right way and this isn't the way that the world's supposed to work. We're privileged to be on this land. It's not the other way around.
That's horrible. That's scary just reading it. Yeah.
A big problem is that, like, a lot of people would hear that and go, oh, that's so terrible, lucky it was such a long time ago. And they haven't sort of connected what's happening today and what's still very much left over. You know, that's not a super long time ago. That will still be ingrained in, you know, a lot of our society.
Yeah, I guess that just highlights that the plan was never to like become a united thing. Like the plan was for white people to come in and take the land and take the culture and effectively wipe the Aboriginal culture out.
I think just reading that, it sends chills through me. Like, it's how intentional colonization was, how determined the colonizers were just to wipe out a whole people.
Invasion Day.
Well, from my understanding from living in a community and getting to know First Nations people around here, it's a time of great pain and a time of unimaginable suffering. So
It's the day that non-Indigenous Australians celebrate in a really most sadistic way, being Invasion Day. The day that the Empire claimed to have founded this land.
Look, I should state obviously that I'm Irish, so that date never really resonated with me before, because for me it was Australia Day, yay, we got a day off, we had great fun. And then probably my second year in Australia, I started to understand the significance of that and how that impacted on Aboriginal people in Australia, and the fact that it was considered an invasion day.
I would love to celebrate all that stuff, but why on the 26th? That's a day of mourning. It should be a day of mourning for everyone, but for people who are personally affected, certainly a day of mourning, and just a day of reflection. It represents genocide and the start of a whole bunch of oppression and hurt and discrimination and everything that's still happening today. That was the date where it started, and it's such a kick in the guts to be like, oh, let's celebrate today, like Australia, you know, on the 26th. That's really disrespectful.
My children, they call it Invasion Day. It's not really Australia Day. Because it's only celebrated by, you know, some of the people.
It's a movement to advocate to change the date of Australia Day.
Change the date means to me walking alongside my work colleagues, my friends, and their families, and supporting changing the date from January the 26th, which is not a date to celebrate, to a date that is inclusive of everyone, that everyone wants to celebrate on that day. And it's about me being an advocate.
It stands for not only acknowledging the truth, but acknowledging the untruths as well. You know, how is it that I lived nearly 2 decades before somebody informed me that Captain Cook was not a hero?
Change the date means respect. Change the date. I don't even think we should have a date. We get rid of the date, or acknowledge the date as a day of mourning.
It's absolute craziness to me that we celebrate Australia on the 26th of January. I think it's just so blatantly wrong and disrespectful.
One of the things that I find really confusing, I guess, is why everybody wouldn't want to support change the date. You know, equality isn't a pie. Just because I get some doesn't mean that you get less. And so it's really been, if it's something that really impacts so strongly on our First Nations people and on really the true custodians of this land, why would we not change the date? And look, even if it was never celebrated, you know, I don't think we can celebrate Australia Day until everybody is ready to celebrate that day.
I believe as non-Indigenous people, we have a really important role to walk alongside, to not take the space up of, to not own, but to support and to take responsibility.
And saying is, look, if there's a significant number of the population are impacted negatively by this, why would you not want to change the date? That's at the very base, you know, before you get even into unpacking institutionalized racism and colonization and all.
You know, genocide and invasion, it sits really uncomfortably with people, and they're like, oh, I'm just, you know, trying to celebrate Australia Day, like it's not, you know, I'm not a racist. But the thing is, that's what we need to be thinking about. You know, why is it celebrating white supremacy? You know, think about it. Just really think about it. It's not that difficult. Yeah.
Ask the question, you know, could there be something that I'm missing? Maybe I'm not understanding it properly. If you don't understand, ask yourself why.
Doesn't feel good, it's not comfortable, and you won't be let off the hook. And it's not saying you're personally a bad person, but it is saying it's time to step into the truth. And if you're unsure, then the truth is readily available. So many books, studies, documentaries.
It's a lifelong learning around what it means to try to be anti-racist and truly open-minded.
Just be a little bit more open and willing to listen and to hear, and just think a little bit critically. I'm one of those people, you know, like I'm a white Australian and I've got so much privilege behind me, and I think it's just so important to just think a little bit critically. Just don't just do something because it's tradition and you've always done it and it's you know what your parents did and whatever. It's okay to sort of not carry that on. It's okay to question things. It's good to question things. And when someone tries to convey to you what the significance of this day and what it means to them, like, don't shut off and go, oh, well, that's got nothing to do with me or whatever. Like, don't be defensive about it. It's not an attack. It's an invitation for you to listen and really hear.
In a way, I think in Australia, because we have this idea of ourselves as being accepting and good-natured and like the larrikin like mentality, etc. I don't know that most Australians like to see themselves as a product of such a violent past, and that I think maybe as Australians we don't like to see ourselves as being the bad guy.
I find it really hard to believe that it's even up for discussion, you know.
White people did come in and steal the land and steal like the longest living culture away from people for such a long time, like, and they just can't sit with the fact that their families were involved in that. Like, whether they were directly involved in it or not, we were all involved in it. And that's the biggest thing that people have to kind of work through. It's not blaming me as a white person now for what my ancestors did, but I still have benefited from what happened.
It's a day in time that's celebrated every year. That's like a sword to the heart for the Indigenous people of Australia.
Change the Date is the social movement to try to at least not continue to cause damage when we can make the choice to do something differently.
It shouldn't be up to Aboriginal people to have to, be burdened with all this. They've already had to put up with colonisation and its impact.
It's a choice every day that us as non-Koori people in Australia have to make, that we're not going to stand for that stuff, and that we have to work through that. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, and yes, I'm going to feel like shit sometimes, but that's all part of the journey, because doing that, like having that feeling, doesn't compare at all to being taken away from my family, or having my culture ripped apart, or never learning about my culture and being just taught to be someone that I'm not.
250 odd years, I think it's probably about time that people stood up and stood with them, because like there's a population that we're talking about who have been extremely generous, and they've shared knowledge, and they've been so kind, and it doesn't really take a whole lot for us to stand with them and learn about our own privilege and what it means to be a beneficiary of colonisation as well.
It's about privileging First Nations people here, their voice and their ways of knowing, being and doing. So if Australia can truly acknowledge, the first people, they'll listen to them and change the date. They've done it in the past to suit themselves, and I'm sure that wasn't a complicated process.
If we don't stand up to injustices when we see them, then we're contributing to a war that I don't want my children to grow up in, really.
I think it's about respect, and it's about acknowledging that the ongoing marking of a day that represents a day of mourning for so many is beyond disrespectful and hurtful and ongoingly violent.